When the fool first sets out on his journey, he is a new life in the universe, and so he has not yet had time to absorb culture and belief and religion and politics and things that would create a limitation to his consciousness. Everything is new to him, and so he almost immediately stumbles upon the magician, and this is more of a concept here rather than a person at this stage. In my Thoth Tarot Symbology series here on YouTube, I often described children as the natural magicians of the universe, and this is because they have not yet had those limitations placed upon them. And so the fool is a natural magician at this stage, and we can see on a lot of magician cards that the magician has his tools of magic set out on a table in front of him, and they're very tactile, of course. He can pick them up and move them around to make magic happen. And so our natural magician does that too. He sees a great wonder and beauty everywhere in the world, and things appear to be magic. And this is his creative impulse of which he sees in those things, and he says, well, I want that, which could be simple things such as food and shelter and warmth and love. And he's able to manifest them effortlessly by what we would say would be almost like magic. So he uses his magic tools, which could be his voice, say crying to get attention as a baby, or a movement of his hands to grab hold of something and pull it towards him, or he will keep going for a particular thing until it is handed to him to satisfy his curiosity. He's literally using his body and his creative impulse to effortlessly manifest the things around him. And that idea of using his body to physically explore the world, which is how a baby picks everything up and puts it in their mouth, that type of thing, we can actually see with the Thoth magician, where we can see upon this that we have the Hebrew character associated with this card of Beth, and this means house. Now, so it can mean the literal physical world around us, that he sees magic in all these things, and it's only in later life, of course, when we've had, as we will in the story, have these limitations placed upon us that they appear to be less magic. The simple things around in the house may appear to be magic to him, and yet of course the house can also be his actual physical body. And so here we have an active consciousness. He's aware that he has this body and that he can move it, and of course it would hurt if you touched something sharp, for example, or something like that. And yet, as soon as you invoke something, you also invoke its balancing or its opposite element as well. And so he has a body, but he isn't a body. He feels that he is somehow inside the body. It's like saying, I have a brain, but I'm not my brain. I'm more than my brain. That's my brain. So then, who am I? So he's starting to explore the universe like that, and so he then invokes the opposite to the magician. They are of equal value, and they represent a duality of each other. So he invokes the High Priestess, and so the High Priestess on the Thoth version, the Priestess, has the Hebrew character of Gimel, which means camel. And so a camel holds water, of course, within itself, and so this is the water of life inside it to nourish it and so on. And so here he has the body and he has the spirit or the soul, the state of consciousness inside the body. And so the High Priestess here is the unseen side of that active consciousness. It's the more mysterious, intuitive side, as well as perhaps representing the potential to come for this new life into the universe. And the standard sort of Rider-Waite High Priestess, and a lot of other cards as well, show something hidden on the High Priestess. So it could be a veil covering one of her eyes, for example, or something. Or on the Rider-Waite we have the Torah, of which is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, hidden partly under her veil. And so this is suggesting that although we can understand some of the words in this literature, we can't understand all of it. There will always be something hidden from us, suggesting, of course, that nature never ever reveals her true face to us, never tells us her secrets. We can only understand certain things. And the High Priestess here as well sits in between Jachin and Boaz, the pillars of which make up the entrance to King Solomon's temple, and we see them on the doors to every Masonic lodge in Freemasonry, where they represent a crossing into a sacred space, a space where things are different and where one would behave differently and their consciousness would be on a different level. A bit like the entrance to a church. Exactly the same thing, the lich gate and the arched doorways leading into the church. The priestess sits in the middle, so she's the middle pillar. She is that space, if you like, in between the two brain hemispheres, where one is neither one thing nor the other. And so as the new life of the Fool has invoked both the magician and the high priestess, he starts to understand something about the universe. He starts to see that there is balancing forces making up the world, that there is a duality in the world and therefore in himself as well. And so he may start to see, as we did, that he has a body and yet there is something animating the body, and that he is awake and then he goes to sleep, and when he's asleep he inhabits a completely different body, a dream body, of which moves around and goes on adventures while his physical body is motionless in bed. And of course, as a very new life, he may see these in very simple ways. This duality in himself could be simply, his 2 arms and 2 legs, or the state of liking something and disliking something else in a mysterious and again magical way, because there's no other way of understanding it at this stage. And so, looking at the universe as well as himself with these 2 cards, these 2 concepts, he sees this balancing force. In the universe we have the sun and the moon, and they correspond to the night and the day, which corresponds to him waking and sleeping, and everything seems to be balanced in that regard. The summer may come in full bloom and glorious radiance, and sooner or later it turns skeletal and cold. And just as the same thing as love can come and it's wonderful in its blooming, and then sooner or later it fades away. There's this balancing force to everything. And our Fool is beginning to see this straight away, that everything seems to link up, and so it's therefore clearly all connected. The Magus is a male character, the Priestess is a female character, an active consciousness, the day, the sun, and an intuitive and subconscious nature with the female and the moon. And of course, when trying to do this great work of conglomerating the 2, we can see that perhaps at this stage everything was once in a state of non-duality, as we began with, where he knows that his life has begun, like we saw on the previous card, and so it must also end too. If everything was once together, it is clearly now not. It's come separately, so we have fallen into a state of duality, which could be a separation from our source. And so at this stage perhaps the Fool feels somewhat alone as well, and as every baby does, they don't like to be left alone. They would cry out for their mother, which is where we're going to end up on the next cards, of course. And yet the Fool is aware that he exists, and he does have this fleshy body, this mortal body, which hurts as well as loves, just as perhaps the universe does as well, because everything there seems to have this balancing force as well. And as we see with even biblical texts, where we see in certain translations of Adam and Eve, another allegory for this dualism, being given coats of skin to wear by God, suggesting that they were once pure consciousness, and then they were clothed into the physical vehicles, the vehicles of which are divided and separate. And yet, like the sun and moon in the cosmos can appear to come together in an eclipse and have a perfect unity, they are divided in order for them to come together, and there a true magic happens, which is the magic of creation itself, of course. And so we're starting to understand this in a deeper level. And if we look at the Book of the Law from Thelema, the goddess knew it, who gives birth to the universe. She carries the stars in her hair. All of the individual people, every man and every woman is a star. Says, "For I am divided for love's sake, and for the chance of union. This is the creation of the world, that the pain of division is as nothing, and the joy of dissolution is of all. For the world exists as 2, For only so can there be known the joy of love, wherein the two are made one. All that is one is alone, and has little pain in making itself two, so that it may know itself and love itself, and rejoice therein. And so what she's saying there is, where the fool is on his journey now, he lives in this world of duality, and of division, and of separation. And he knows that he can love, and he can find and attain that unity. And so it's not necessarily saying, that there's this original sin, or there's this fall of man, or anything like that. It's simply saying, the world's not going to be pure suffering, but you can't have your love without your suffering, otherwise you're just going to have a plain state. Without the division, you couldn't have the separate states, and their desire to find union in each other. But then, of course, the fool may ask himself, how could this happen with the universe as well? Could it have started in this oneness, become separate, and wished or desired or found itself inexplainably pulled back towards union? Some, of course, believe that this type of thing does happen to the universe, that it begins in a singularity and comes out into all these different planets and forms and different spheres of existence, until it can grow no longer and comes back in on itself to another singularity, wherein it is born again, or a new life is born again, just as the union between these two things, this magus, this priestess, this male and female, however we choose to interpret it, find unity in their balancing forces, and the great manifestation, the great work of actual life and creation begins to show itself in the world around us.